Hey guys, welcome back to One Candle Paranormal Case Files. Here with your host, Marcus Dee. And guys, Vic's still out this week, but joining me in the studio today, I got another great special guest host for you guys. This guy has written several articles for Ask a Libertarian, and you can catch him on his YouTube channel where he makes awesome music that's going to be featured in today's episode. So I want you guys to give a special welcome to my good friend with a perfect fitting name, the Libertarian Guitarist.
Well, thank you very much, Marcus Dee, for inviting me to your channel. It's a privilege, and I hope we are able to share some really cool ideas today.
And oh man, it's going to be a great episode, guys, because I cannot wait to delve into this topic. Now, guys, make sure you have Majestic clearance, because today we're going to talk about Bob Lazar. On May 14th, 1989, investigative journalist George Knapp interviewed a black silhouetted man who was using the code name Dennis. Dennis claimed that he was approached by the government to work at a secret facility known as S4 near Groom Lake, or as we know it, Area 51. Dennis claims that he was recruited to reverse engineer the propulsion systems for 9 alien spacecraft the American government was in possession of. The craft was designed and powered using an extraterrestrial element called Element 115, and Dennis was tasked with powering the spacecraft with materials found here on Earth. Shortly after the interview, it was revealed that Dennis's real name was Bob Lazar, an American businessman who holds master's degrees in both physics and electrical technology. Bob reported that he was terminated from employment at Area 51 for bringing his family and friends to witness top-secret test flights near Area 51. Bob claims that he has come forward with this information to ensure his safety after being dismissed from working at Area 51. Since his original interview in 1989, Bob has been featured in numerous documentaries, but has never once changed his story. So, man, what is your favorite part about the Bob Lazar story?
Well, for one, UFOs, flying saucers, aliens, spaceships, that's not a normal fascination of mine. I'm not even researching that stuff. I don't even necessarily believe that aliens have visited our planet. However, I'm just intrigued by Bob Lazar because he comes across as a very intelligent, scientific, very thorough human being, and very knowledgeable about not just he's not just the alien guy. He talks about so many different things, from quantum physics to jet propulsion to renewable energies, and I've just always found him to be a very fascinating person, aside from the alien stuff that he talks about Area 51.
Yeah, one of the things that I really liked about him is there are several documentaries about Bob Lazar where he's featured. Like, he has a video that I absolutely love from the early 1990s, and it is a straight 1990s documentaries where he literally just goes, "Hi, I'm Bob Lazar, and these are government secrets," and he just goes for 30 minutes for just talking about this theoretical propulsion system and how the alien spacecraft, the science behind it, how it would have worked, and manipulating gravity in order to do that, before he even just starts talking about the stuff he saw in Area 51. And speaking of Area 51, we wouldn't even know about Area 51 if it wasn't for Bob Lazar, right?
That's right. Yeah. Area 51, one of the areas within the United States in which there is a literal totalitarian government within what's supposed to be, at least on paper, a free, quote-unquote, democratic society, a place where constitutional protections do not apply, environmental laws are exempted, you can be shot and killed just for entering. And I would argue that this government within a government is the real governing body of the United States, and that this junk we vote for every 2 to 4 years is just a facade to keep the public from revolting, basically, by making them think that they actually have a say in how our country operates.
Dude, that makes me want to grab my Guy Fawkes mask too when you said that too.
Well, I got mine in my bedroom, so...
Yeah. Like you can't go out to Area 51. Like, if you try to ride up that Area 51, you're met by Jews with machine guns with their guns pointed straight at your head. Like Bob Lazar said it happened to, like when he was talking about that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the way I mean, secrecy is paramount when it comes to our government, and like anything that threatens, not even threatens, but I mean, anything that shows how messed up they really are is a perceived threat to them, and so they have to either neutralize, and by neutralize I mean they seem to either take out the people that are exposing this stuff, or they ruin their credibility, or both, like depending on which better suits them. That seems to be the case.
Yeah, and that was the whole reason why Bob Lazar comes forward in the first place, is because he's afraid of the government. He's afraid of the repercussions that were going to happen when he found out, or when the government found out, that he was disclosing these secrets to his friends and to his wife, and that's why he comes forward.
Right.
Do you know one of the weirdest things that I noticed in those early documentaries where he's talking about his experiences?
What's that?
And S4 is that he's talking about all of the things that he saw, but he didn't work at S4 for very long, right?
Right. It was a matter of months. It wasn't a very long time at all.
So, imagine you are Joe Schmo Scientist. And I'm going to get more into that on Joe Schmo Scientist a little bit later. But anyway, you are Joe Schmo Scientist, and you are brought to a facility where you are shown documentation that says that the government has been involved with alien activity for thousands of years. Here is alien tech. You're being shown tech that does not exist on Earth as we know it. It is a complete game changer. It's a complete paradigm shift about everything that you know about this universe. What's probably going to be initial reaction? To the average person, like, what would you think? Like to me, that would be mind-blowing.
It would be, yeah.
But if you watch the documentaries and the interviews with Bob Lazar, like, he doesn't seem like a person that's completely blown away. I mean, I don't know if that's just his personality. That may be what the case is. I don't know. He seems like a very dry kind of guy. But if I'm being shown this stuff, I mean,
it might be because of his knowledge of physics and quantum mechanics and the theory of relativity, all those things. I mean, it might just be, this is a physical manifestation of all those theories.
Yeah, but you're still being shown something by the government that is telling you aliens have existed for thousands of years. We are not alone in the universe. And Bob Lazar is not blown away by this. I think maybe that may have been one of the reasons about maybe why they tried to recruit Bob Lazar, because you need somebody like that. You need somebody that's not going to completely break down. Maybe that was one of the reasons about why he was recruited. I don't know. But another part of the story that I find intriguing too is Bob Lazar claims that he went to MIT, claims that he has degrees from Caltech, and he has this big background in physics and chemistry and engineering and all this and all these sorts of stuff. But if you delve into it, you can't find any records of it.
Right. Which, if he's telling the truth, then compare it to like somebody in the witness protection program. It's not very hard for the government to erase somebody's history if they have a reason to.
Yeah, so that's how they try to erase all of his past educational background. One of the things that always blows me away about the Bob Lazar story is, and you guys know me, you guys know that listen to the channel, I'm always nitpicking out the nitty gritty. So I'm a dude trying to get a job. Okay. One of the ways that a scientist is trying to get a job is you got to prove your educational background. Okay. So I've now been fired from Area 51. So he's trying to get into the job. So if you're trying to do that, a lot of times you're having to prove your educational background. So if they're trying to cover up your background, wouldn't you have a story about you trying to go get a job somewhere else and they couldn't verify your background? Like your educational background? But think about it, like if I'm getting a degree at MIT, that's a top prestigious school.
Right.
Aren't you gonna have like your diploma framed?
It could be that whenever he was hired to work at S4, that he was told, because I mean they basically have you sign away your life to the organization itself, and you have to swear to secrecy, blah 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 blah. If you reveal anything that's told to you, you get a so much prison sentence and obtain $100,000 fine or whatever. So I mean, it wouldn't be out of the question that they would, hey, you're going to have to also turn in all your credentials, all your schooling history, your diplomas, and give them to us, and so that if things go crazy, nobody's going to be able to believe anything you say if you decide to speak a word of it.
But then again, I also don't know how, like, if he didn't have these sorts of backgrounds, like, how he could do stuff like, I don't know, build a rocket car.
Right. Yeah.
Which is true. He built his own rocket car.
Yeah, he not only his own rocket car, but he built his own fuel efficient, well, not even fuel efficient, zero emission, souped up Corvette that runs basically on water. What he does is he converts the water into hydrogen and oxygen, and the engine burns the hydrogen to propel the car, and it releases oxygen back into the atmosphere. So it's basically like driving a living tree around. So it's very clean energy, and it's renewable energy, and you don't have to rely on gas stations or gasoline. And according to Bob, it's a much safer means of transportation than gasoline powered vehicles. As he says, you can shoot at it, you can cut it in half with a chainsaw, or you can set it on fire and it's not going to explode like a gas tank would. And apparently the only reason that this kind of technology isn't available to the general population is because a certain component that makes the tanks work is a certain hydride that's been banned for sale and for purchase by the U.S. government, because it is a component that's also made in the development of nuclear weapons. Even though that this particular hydride is completely harmless by itself, in and of itself, it's not dangerous, but because it's a component of nuclear weapons, it's been banned for sale. However, you can make your own of this particular hydride, but the way you make it is with particle accelerators. So what does Bob do? He builds his own particle accelerator in his own house, his own miniature particle accelerator, to make the hydride necessary to make his own free energy car. So that's pretty cool, and the guy's obviously a genius. I mean, how many people do you know can make their own particle accelerators in their backyard and their own zero emissions engine for their Corvettes? I mean, the guy's obviously very intelligent.
So one of the most fascinating parts about the Bob Lazar story is always this question: why recruit Bob Lazar?
I think we could say the same thing about guys like Edward Snowden, people with seemingly questionable and kind of sketchy backgrounds, credentials, whatever. But I think the government tries to, especially in top secret cases, whether it's the NSA or the alleged workings of reverse engineering of alien spacecraft, done at not Groom Lake, but the S4 location 50 miles south of Groom Lake. They want people that aren't going to have a lot of connections, people that aren't going to have a lot of people miss them if they're working on these black projects and something goes awry, there's an explosion, people are killed. They don't want recourse from their experiments or whatever they're doing out there. I think that might be a reason why they would pick an unassuming man like Bob Lazar, not only because he's very knowledgeable about physics and stuff like that, but just because he's kind of a no-name to go with the research.
Well, if you think about what we've learned from the 1940s and things like that, when it comes to things like nuclear energy, one of the things that they learned was how dangerous radiation can be. We know radiation bad. So if you have the Neil deGrasse Tyson of the day, he can't go work on these things because it's dangerous. One of the things Bob Lazar talked about was he said the reason he was recruited was because the guy before him died while working on this project. So nobody's going to notice Bob Lazar disappearing. You know,
Right.
What does the government probably value more than innovation? Probably people not snitching.
Right.
Unfortunately, they didn't get that in Bob Lazar, but what are you going to do? So if Bob Lazar was really exposed to an alien spacecraft, why doesn't he have anything to say about other parts of the spacecraft? Like its weapons or its communication systems or navigational array or anything like that?
When it comes to all manners of government, especially the U.S. government, anybody working on anything only knows what they need to know and nothing beyond that, which is also ironically the antithesis, not to mention a severe hindrance to scientific knowledge. I mean, the scientific method requires the free and open exchange of ideas, not secrecy, threats, or covering up mistakes.
Yeah, and I think he was only brought in to work on reverse engineering the propulsion system.
Correct.
This whole concept of it being a compartmentalized task. Like, for example, if you think about, say, like the Manhattan Project, where different scientists were brought in, it was actually constructed in various different parts of the United States, and every single location was working on a different project, and they didn't know what everybody else was working on.
Correct.
You know, it was on a need-to-know basis until everything finally came together.
And at first, he didn't even know that these were alien spacecraft that
No, he
he was
didn't.
working on. Whenever he was first shown them, he thought that this explains all this flying saucer sightings. We're making secret fighters that look like flying saucers. Like whenever he first started working there, he was given over 100 debriefings, laying out this entire, not only the technology that he'd be working on, but the alleged entire history of alien quote unquote intervention and inner workings between human beings and these alien species, which he thought was just a psychological test that he was being put through to see, like, I don't know if his mental status was up to par. Who knows?
It makes sense. It very well could. You know, if you're probably getting to the bottom candidates for something, like how do you sort the last three guys? How do you see who's not tough enough?
Right.
And maybe they had two other guys that came in. They showed them these briefings that they made up at the time. I'm not saying that's what they did, but like they showed them these three briefings with this disinformation, and the other two dudes freaked out. Bob Lazar is not a guy that looks like he freaks out. Like, he shows very little emotion in really any interview he ever does.
Yeah.
And then they're like, that's the guy we need because he's not going to freak out when we show when we show him the next part.
Yeah. And it wasn't until, like I said, he was shown the vehicles, thought, oh, this is just an experimental aircraft. He went inside the craft and realized that this was not made by or for human beings. The people couldn't fit comfortably in there. The seats in the rooms themselves were made for somebody 3 or 4 feet tall, not for a full-grown adult human being. So that along with remembering what he had read in the debriefings kind of made him, oh, this was made from somewhere else. This is not earthly technology. This is advanced extraterrestrial technology.
I really want to know when that light bulb moment. When you look at Bob Lazar's documentaries, I really want to see that light bulb moment for like how he must have looked when he finally clicked that something weird was going on. That being said, you know, one of the things that I thought about too, you know how he was working in a place called S4?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what S1, 2, and 3 are.
That's a good point. I mean, and this was in the 80s. So
Yeah,
I mean,
89,
God only knows what they're working on today and how many S's there are.
Mm-hmm.
and how many of these hangars they're building in the side of mountains to look like the landscape of. I mean, everybody nowadays knows Area 51. You can see satellite images of it. The only reason, like we said earlier, that Area 51 is a household name is because of Bob Lazar's story.
Yeah, the government didn't even confirm that Area 51 even existed until like 2011 or 13.
That was another point I was going to bring up. And the only reason the government even acknowledged that there was a base there in the first place is because in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, there were families of employees that worked there, and this isn't about S4, but more about Groom Lake. There were employees there that were getting sick and dying from the toxic waste being dumped from their experimental aircraft, like the stealth bomber, stealth fighter, SR-71, blah, 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 blah.
Yep, because Area 51 is exempt from most environmental law.
Exactly. And so people were getting sick and dying, and their families wanted compensation for wrongful deaths. So the families sued the government for compensation for their family members being killed as a result of working out at Area 51. And even the judges that were hearing the cases were saying, well, we can't even say if this is an actual base. And the lawyers would be like, I can drive you to the base, Judge. I can point at it. And anyway, these revelations that came out because of the criminal activity within our own government is the reason why they even admitted that there was a base there in the first place. Now, they didn't go into the specifics or anything. They just said they acknowledged, yes, there's a base out there. And like Marcus said, it wasn't even until around 2011 that they officially acknowledged that the base exists.
So I think one of the most important things about Bob Lazar and his story is how over the course of these years is that over time, he's never changed his story once. He's never changed his story about what he saw, what he was working on, any of that stuff. And over time, there have been some things that have been revealed that makes it a lot easier to believe his story. Like one of the things he talked about in some of his early interviews was how he even got into S4. Was that one of the things that he did was he'd have to go up to this hand scanner thing, and you'd have to place your hand on it, and there were these little 5 rods that were poking out, and it would scan your hand, and they told him it was scanning your bone structure and whatnot. And this is in the 80s.
Right.
This is in the 80s. This is kind of some advanced tech for the 80s.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. And that's how that you would get in. Some pretty sci-fi stuff right there. And it's only so recently that stuff has come to light that we've shown that there have been other projects where that technology actually exists.
Right.
And it's a real thing where, and there's photos of it, we can see where someone put their hand on something and it scans your bone density.
And not to mention, his knowledge of the locations of the bases and, how you get there.
Oh, no. We're not done yet. You come on to you come to our YouTube channel. We get to delve into some weirder stuff now. So one of the ways you get into S4 is they're scanning your bones. Now my question is this: why?
It's a good question.
Of all the ways to verify getting into a place like that, badges, I don't know,
fingerprints,
things like that. You know the person. The way you get in is they scan and check your bones.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
The outside part, are you guys following with me? The outside part is not enough. They got to check something on the inside.
Yeah, you would think, unless Mr. Lazar or these other employees have exact doppelgangers, why would you need to know their bone structure in order to get in the facility? Oh, that's Bob. Yeah. Oh, wait, that's not Bob. We gotta check the distance between his index and his middle finger, and the correlation between the pinky and the thumb. We gotta get all this stuff together before we can verify that that's Bob Lazar.
Yeah, there's a little crack from when you fell out of the tree. Okay, we're good. I don't know if they're actually worried about doppelgangers. I don't know if they're worried about aliens pretending to be humans trying to get into the facility, because they never said. Bob Lazar never says how they got their hands on the technology,
right,
on the spacecraft.
I think in a recent interview he said he assumed it was an archaeological find, but he didn't go into what that means exactly. Did they find it on Earth, or was it like a crash? Was it given to them? So we don't really know.
It's one of those food for thoughts. So, man, I'm going to point blank ask you, do you think Bob Lazar is lying?
Well, there's only two answers to that. Either he's telling the truth about what he experiences or what he thinks he experiences, or he's the best liar I've ever seen. Usually whenever like people are lying like that, if they're that good at lying, they're sociopathic and manipulative, and nothing about him comes across as like he's trying to manipulate you into like believing things or having a certain worldview. You must think what I think, or you're wrong. Like he's always just been very straightforward about what he claims to have experienced.
And he's passed 4 lie detectors.
Right. Yeah, that's true too. That's a good point.
And I'm glad we're getting into this, because one of the things that Bob Lazar always gets at is that, oh, I'm not making this up because I'm not trying to get attention. I'm not trying to do this because, I want to, or things like that. I'm doing this for protection. I'm doing this for that. I was watching a documentary about him, and he's driving this car, and he drives his car up, and there's a shot of him pulling up to his house in this red convertible thing. I think it's what it looks like. And his license plate says MJ12.
Majestic 12, yeah.
Yeah, to the untrained eye, that just looks like a novelty license plate. And if you don't know what the Majestic 12 are, they're a group of 12 individuals that are supposed to advise the president on extraterrestrial activity. And I'm Bob Lazar. I'm not trying to draw any attention to myself, but I'm driving around with the novelty license plate that says MJ12.
To me, I guess it was kind of like whenever he did that first interview in Silhouette, where he named himself Dennis as his fake name, as kind of a FU to his immediate supervisor. The MJ12 might be another FU to the people that kind of were trying to mess up his life.
But you're a guy that has been shot at. You've been raided by the cops.
He might not have anything to lose at this point. It's like, well, I already told everything. If something happens, oh well. So if you're gonna do that, you can F off, basically.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that little thought for you guys in the comments below on what you guys think with that novelty license plate. That just jumped out at me as I was watching that. I'm like, am I the first person to catch this? There's no way. There's no way I'm the first person that's caught on to that, what he was doing right there.
I'm sure it was intentional.
Oh, I'm sure that it was too. I'm sure it was.
Do I personally think that Lazar is telling the truth? I think he's definitely telling the truth about what he believes that he experienced. Now, that doesn't mean that the government didn't lie to him. The government may have created the technology themselves, made it appear to be alien technology by putting the tiny seats and whatnot in it, and fed Bob a line of BS about aliens at the base or alien intervention in human history, similar to those silly theories promoted by the Ancient Alien series on the History Channel with the weird guy with the weird hair.
And if you're very interested in ancient astronaut theory, if you become a patron, that is one of our most recent videos that we did, and you can learn all about that on there.
And they could have done all of this simply to test out the quote-unquote geek factor. And what I mean by that is to see if a highly intelligent person could randomly duplicate or reverse engineer the technology if it came into the hands of different people, different governments, etc.
Maybe he was part of an experiment to see could the average person recreate some of this technology.
Right.
And he would be a good candidate, for that. He may be a smart guy.
Yeah, he seems to be able to piece together things rather effectively in his own backyard, his own home, his own bedrooms, whatever. But I mean, by his own words, the extent of his understandings about the scope of alien happenings and its role in government technology was from those over 100 briefings he was given to read and educate himself on before he ever even started working on trying to reverse engineer the craft. So like I said, the government could have given him this elaborate otherworldly false background as a cover to control for the element of technological thievery by other parties.
Because I completely agree. I think that Bob Lazar believes and probably did work at the facility that he said that he worked at. You know, the whole thing with the hand scan technology thing that he was talking about, it proves that was accurate, and being able to know where all of this stuff is, the story's never changing and whatnot.
But the reason I like and respect Mr. Lazar is because he says before he worked for S4 that he had this idea that government they did good for the people. They were here to protect us. They had our best interest at heart. But after his experiences working there, he said, and I quote, the government is doing everything but looking out for us. The only thing that they're looking out for is themselves. And I kind of admire that sentiment quite a bit, and that's kind of been my own philosophy on government for years and years. Anyone who has a healthy distrust of government's intentions is an ally in my book.
So another intriguing part of the Bob Lazar story often centers around element 115. I think it's called Muscovium is what it's actually called now. And Bob Lazar claimed that when he was in S4, they had a bunch of element 115 that was stable that they could manipulate. And this was what was used in the propulsion system for the alien spacecraft. And that was how it moved, and that was one of the things that the U.S. government was trying to do, is say, hey, let's recreate this without element 115 so that we can use this. And a lot of people ask, did Bob Lazar remove some of element 115? Did he take some of it home? Did he sneak some of it out?
Well, the fascinating thing to me about 115 in general is that he was talking about this stuff before it was even known to exist. In early interviews, he was often asked if he was able to acquire any of the 115 that he said was at the base that they used to fuel the craft, and he would always say no comment. To me, it's interesting that he even knew about element 115 back in 89 or whenever he worked at S4. He was even describing this element before it was even known to exist. I can't remember off the top of my head what the periodic table went to in 1989, but it wasn't 115. It was well below that. And today they have been able to, even though they've only created 4 atoms unstable in particle accelerators, element 115 does exist now. And he was talking about it years before it was even known to exist.
I don't know, man. He's saying no comment in some of these interviews. If the government really thought that Bob Lazar had taken an alien substance and left the base with it, I really think that would have been the line. I really think that would have been a black bag moment that they would have had to intervene. I mean, we've seen several other stories about just even terrestrial downed equipment from other countries and how the U.S. government has responded. If you look at the Kecksburg incident, for instance, where the government, or a lot of people claim that may be ours, or that may be a Russian down satellite or whatever it was swarmed with agents, and it was cut off, and they're taking people's recordings and documentation that they have of the incident. And for somebody to sit there and try to theorize that Bob Lazar may have actually taken something that sensitive from it, I really think the government would have intervened.
Well, I mean, if he would have disappeared or died mysteriously or committed suicide, then since he'd already gone forward with all this information, it would have validated every claim that he made, because he would have dropped dead, and he was right, the government killed him because he knew all this stuff and because he took element 115 and all this stuff.
True, but they might not have done it in that exact moment. I think that it probably would have occurred maybe somewhere down the line, or I don't know. I feel like that would have had to have been a line that would have forced the government's hand. We watched the 2018 documentary, the Bob Lazar documentary, which you guys should go watch. It's really cool. What it does, it'll piece together a lot of the documentaries Bob Lazar has been in over the past, and it's a good thing if you've never seen the Bob Lazar story. It's a good thing. It's a good one to watch. But one of the things they try to do in there and do is the documenter tries to ask Bob Lazar, like, did you sneak any of that stuff out? Oh, no, wait, let's turn off our cell phones and sit that down. If I'm a person that's sitting there with my hands on that sensitive extraterrestrial activity, I'm not even going to let them record me even asking that particular question. I'm going to be freaking out at that possibility. But then in the documentary, it tries to cut to, oh, the next day, Bob Lazar is raided by the FBI. And they make up this story about how it's because his current company, they're looking for some sort of piece of document or whatever, and they're trying to cover that up. I'm like, I feel like that's a line with the U.S. government that they'd have to respond. So, all right, Mr. Libertarian Guitarist, final thoughts on Bob Lazar.
Well, I think the one thing you can take away from it, even if you don't believe the alien stuff, because I don't even believe that necessarily that aliens have visited Earth and that they've collaborated with human beings and that they've intervened in human history. I don't believe in any of that necessarily. I don't really care if aliens are here or not. The thing you can take away from Bob's story is that you should question anything the government says or does regarding any subject, because they have proven time and time again that they will lie and cheat and steal and murder to get what they want. And that's what you need to remember whenever you're listening to Bob Lazar's accounts or Edward Snowden's or the recent arrest of Julian Assange. You can take away that knowledge that the government doesn't care about you. They care about their own interests and keeping them secret.
For me, I think that the story of Bob Lazar shows that Bob Lazar probably worked at Area 51. I think there's been enough consistency in his story to confirm that and for us to be able to believe that. And I think if you look at his accounts of what goes down with Area 51 and his story of that, and you look at the federal government's account of what goes down in Area 51, I think Bob Lazar has proven that he's been a little bit more transparent, or a lot more transparent, about what goes down there. Now, whether or not do I think that he was actually working on anything there, I could believe that, because I think the one thing that we do know about the government is they usually have technology before the American public.
Right.
So he probably was working with advanced technology that the government probably had their hands on. I'm inclined to believe I think the government probably does have their hands on alien technology, but I think that Bob Lazar has shown that he's been consistent and that his story is not changing. So whether or not if you believe Bob Lazar's story, that's up to you. I'm going to let you guys give your thoughts about it in the comments below. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out our episode on Bob Lazar. I had a great time making it. I always love doing any sort of video where we're talking about secret government projects and things like that. I had a really good time doing this episode with my friend, the Libertarian Guitarist. I hope you guys liked him as a guest. I can't wait to get Vic back here in the studio to record episodes with me, guys. So I wish him the best and hope he comes back soon. If you guys like this episode, don't forget to leave a like, a share, and a subscribe. And of course, hit that little notification bell so that you guys can always be up to date on all the latest One Candle Paranormal content. As always, guys, if you really like the episode, think about checking out our Patreon and becoming a patron today, where we do all sorts of videos just for our patrons. I just recorded a video on ancient astronaut theory with a good friend of mine, Bulldog Wilenko from the Bulldog Unchained podcast. I had a great time making that episode with him too. Go check that out as well. If you guys have any ideas for videos, please put them in the comments below. I always love taking suggestions from the fans. And don't forget to leave your thoughts on Bob Lazar below. You know, he's a pretty interesting individual, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on what you guys think about him and his story. But most importantly, keep believing, because we'll keep listening.